Okay, hello and welcome back everyone to Grockit's OGTV. This is the GMAT edition of the GMAT programming where we go through the 12th edition to the guide to the test, that one right there. You're happy because you are working your way through it and you're actually almost done if you've been following along with the broadcast so far. My name's Jim Jacobson and I today am going to help you get through some sentence correction questions. I realized this morning actually, well it's morning for me, that I actually got a question behind what's actually been published as the schedule. So today we're going to be doing 66 through, what did I decide, 77. 77. So we're going to do an extra one today. Good story, I know. I just figured I'd alert you to that fact that I know that I screwed up a little bit. So this time, as always, I will be reading you the questions. You should have the book in front of you and we'll work through them together. We may as well start with that. So, page 669. It's actually the 69th broadcast, so it's an auspicious page on which to start. Question number 66. So, the 32 species that make up the dolphin family are closely related to whales, and in fact include the animal known as the killer whale, which can grow to be 30 feet long and is famous for its aggressive hunting pods. So, in this one, what are we looking for? We need definitely some parallelism. So we have 32 species. They are related and include so both of these need to be plural because species here, 32 makes species plural. Species is one of those words that's both singular and plural, or looks the same in both singular and plural, like deer. Deer works the same way. And fish, actually, and sheep. Anyway, this one just looks that way because it has an S in the singular in Latin, so we keep it the same. Okay, anyway, as opposed to these, which are older Anglo-Saxon Germanic root words. Good story. So, 32 species are related and include. We can definitely eliminate any of the answers that start off with includes. Includes is naughty because 32 species don't includes. That's a subject-verb mismatch. So choices D and E we can eliminate immediately on the basis of includes. Actually, I probably should make that a happy face because we're glad we eliminated some answer choices. Then the other aspect of this one is the parallelism in what we described about the killer whale. So the killer whale which can grow and is. So again, we have present tense verbs, and these things need to be as parallel as possible because they're both describing the killer whale. And so, things that reduce the parallelism, so for example, choice C says, include the animal known as the killer whale growing up to 30 feet long and being. Actually, that's parallel, but the problem with choice C is that growing and being, remember, ing words have this issue where they can refer back further than just the noun before. They can refer to the whole clause. It's not actually clear whether we're talking about the killer whale or the 32 species that are growing and being famous for its aggressive hunting pods. So choice C is a little bit unclear. I mean, even though context tells us that it's the killer whale, and grammar tells us that the 32 species shouldn't be being famous for its aggressive hunting pods, it's still undesirable for that reason. Choice B has killer whale growing as big as 30 feet long and famous. So in that one, we have that it's growing and famous. In this case, it's not the parallelism that we were after. So choice B is eliminated. So choice A is the only one that's left. closely related to whales and in fact include the animal known as the killer whale, which can grow to be 30 feet long and is famous for its aggressive hunting pods. That's the original sentence as written. It's also the one that's correct. And with that, we turn the page to page 670. Question number 67. Affording strategic proximity to the Strait of Gibraltar, Morocco was also of interest to the French throughout the first half of the 20th century because they assumed that if they did not hold it, their grip on Algeria was always insecure. Now, the one thing about this one is that it was kind of a conditional situation. They believed that if they did not hold it, their grip on Algeria. So is a factual statement. Their grip on Algeria was always insecure. But of course they did hold Morocco, so their grip on Algeria was secure. They were worried that it would not be secure. So rather than was, we need would. So because again, it was a hypothetical contrary to fact condition at the time. They had Morocco, and they according to their beliefs anyway, their hold on Algeria was secure thereby. So anything with was is not going to help us. We need would. And we basically need to we need to not have any other just sort of straightforward past tenses describing their hold on Algeria. Anyway, choice A has was, which does not correctly indicate the contrafactual element because they did have Morocco. Choice B, because they assumed that without it, their grip on Algeria would never be secure. Well, we can keep that one. Choice C, assumed that their grip on Algeria was not ever secure if they did not hold it. So aside from the it, which could be either Algeria or Morocco, this one also has was. So, oh, sorry, haha, it's not that one. It's choice C that has it and was. So that's a problem. Choice D, they assumed that without that, they could never be secure about their grip on Algeria. They could never be secure about. Really, what we just wanted to have was just their grip on Algeria, not that they be secure about their grip on Algeria. That's extra words. I don't know why I put quotes there. It's just plain wordy. Also, choice D, without that. The referent for that is not clear. We could have done with it earlier in the sentence, as it is in choice B, but that generally refers to something further back, and I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's the Strait of Gibraltar. That is unclear. And then choice E, they assumed that never would their grip on Algeria be secure if they did not hold it. So this is another ambiguous it, and never would their grip on Algeria be secure. Now, in real English, of course, that's grammatically correct. You can kind of do convoluted sentence structures and complex negations and things like that, and it can make your writing very interesting. But that type of stylistic decision is really meant more for more rhetorical or creative or fictional contexts. If you're writing a speech, that would make sense. But if you're just trying to convey factual information, complex, compound, inverted sentence structures, really just make it harder for your reader to read. And the GMAT does not want you to do that whenever possible. Or the GMAT wants you to not do that whenever possible. So it's also awkwardly worded. So choice E is not it, leaving us only with choice B. Assumed that without it, their grip on Algeria would never be secure. Straightforward, clear, we know what it is that they were holding and why. Okay, 6, 7, 0, 6, 8. The first trenches that were cut into a 500-acre site at Tel Hamoukar, Syria, have yielded strong evidence for centrally administered complex societies in northern regions of the Middle East Middle East that were arising simultaneously with, but independently of, the more celebrated city-states of southern Mesopotamia in what is now southern Iraq. Okay, so, wow. Long sentence, a lot of modifying phrases. On this one, we need to make sure of several things. One, that it's as clear as possible. So the modifying phrases need to be close to the things that they're modifying, so we don't inadvertently change the meaning of the sentence. Number two, we want it to be as concise as possible. And these are rules for the GMAT in general, but the longer the sentence and the more convoluted it is, the more important these things become. So any way that we can get rid of extra words and make sure that modifiers are as close as possible to the thing modified, the better off we are. The sentence as written actually does not contain any grammatical mistakes that at least as far as I can see. So we can definitely keep it around as an option. There's definitely some concision that could be introduced. You know, there's trenches that were cut. You could also just say the first trenches cut into a 500-acre site. So you can go directly to the passive participle there, the perfect passive participle, to kind of cut out some words out of the sentence. Also, the further on in the sentence, we have another relative pronoun thing. The centrally administered complex societies in northern regions of the Middle East that were arising. We could have just said region or I guess complex societies arising, you know, as opposed to that were. So really, there's two that were's in choice A that might potentially be sources of concision in later sentences. And actually, I can see right away that choice B also has that were, so that's potentially an issue. Also, there is a subject-verb mismatch in choice B because the subject of the sentence is the first trenches. That's the part that's not underlined, or part of the part that's not underlined. The first trenches is the subject of the verb yield or have yielded in the second line. Choice B has yields. So it says trenches yields, which is a subject-verb mismatch. It should be trenches yield. Can get rid of B on that basis. Choice C, remember, be suspicious of the words being and having. Very often when they're used to express what something is or what's been done to it, it's shorter just to go directly to the word that comes after being or having without that word there. So choice C, the first trenches having been cut, again, we could just go directly to the first trenches cut. So choice C has having been, which is clearly extra wordage. Get rid of that. Choice D, the first trenches cut into a 500-acre site at Tel Hamukar, Syria, yields. So once again, we have trenches yields. I guess I should have done a vertical scan for that, but when you have a really long answer choice like this, it's much harder to do a vertical scan. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you should probably, well, no, what I should say is what I personally do is I restrict vertical scans on really long answer choices to the very beginnings and the very ends of the long sentence. Otherwise, I may as well just read the whole thing if I'm going to have to scan the whole thing for the word yields in the middle of it. Maybe that's lazy. I guess I just don't feel like messing with it, you know, because especially if I'm doing a vertical scan for one particular type of error, like yields instead of yield, it's going to be in a slightly different place in a long answer choice, and I'm going to have to read that whole thing. And that act of kind of skimming the whole thing, I'm going to have to go back and reread it again to eliminate the answer choices that didn't have yields instead of yields. So I may as well just read it, you know, thoroughly once when it's a long one. Again, unless it's something that's at the beginning of the sentence, like having been or that were, or beginning of the underlined portion, I mean. Anyway, trenches yields is a subject for mismatch. Choice D is not our friend. And we have choice E, the first trenches cut into a 500-acre site at Tel Hamukar, Syria, have yielded strong evidence that centrally administered complex societies in northern regions of the Middle East arose simultaneously with, but independently of, the more celebrated blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this one also corrects the issues that we had with wordy things at the beginning. It has the correct, or it has a correct form of the verb yield that matches up with trenches. It also gets rid of the extra words in that were in choice A. So choice A, because it's wordier than choice E, on that basis alone, we eliminate it, even though it was grammatically correct. Okay. Choice E for number 68. 670, question number 69. Once they had seen the report from the medical examiner, the investigators did not doubt whether the body recovered from the river was the man who had attempted to escape from the state prison. Okay, a couple things that jump out at me. When you say that somebody did not doubt, which is what the sentence as written actually says, it always needs to be followed by that. It's a direct, indirect statement. They did not doubt that, blah. The other issue, so that's number one, we need to have did not doubt that. And it could be some other form of did not doubt. It could also be had no doubt. It doesn't actually have to be the verb itself to doubt. The other one, and this one's a little bit more subtle, is the body recovered was the man. Without getting into too much metaphysical stuff, basically men, women, children are living things that are more than just their body. There's also they also have to be alive, otherwise they are a body rather than a person. So we wouldn't say that the body was the man. We would say the body was that of a man, or the man. So body was that of the man. Again, grammatically, people are more than just their body. Is that true grammatically? Yeah, I think so. I mean, really, it would be a very unusual usage to say that the body was the person, as opposed to the body being that of the person. Anyway, so we need the body to be that of the man, and we need to have no doubt that, which is some extra that's, which will make our answer choice potentially more wordy than anything else we see. But sometimes the wordier answer is the correct one. So choice A has did not doubt and does not have that. And it also has the body was the man. So doubly wrong. Choice B, have no doubt whether the body recovered from the river was the man. Same exact issues. Choice C, had not doubted that. Okay, so that part's right. Had not doubted that the body recovered from the river was. So this is, again, body does not equal man. Choice D, have no doubt whether the body recovered from the river was that of. So this one is missing the that goes after doubt, which leaves us only with choice E, had no doubt that the body recovered from the river was that of the man who had attempted to escape from the state prison. So in this particular case, the most wordy answer turns out to be the correct one. And then I guess by definition it's not actually wordy, because in the GMAT terms anyway, wordy doesn't mean just have the most words, it means have the most unnecessary words. All the words in the answer choice E are needed for clarity and correctitude. So 69, answer choice E. 670, number 70. His studies of ice-polished rocks in his alpine homeland, far outside the range of present-day glaciers, led Louis Agassiz in 1837 to propose the concept of an age in which great ice sheets had existed in now currently temperate areas. So what we need here, things that we notice, the main one is that past perfect tense in terms of predictions about what might be an issue. Remember that you're only going to see that past perfect tense when you have a main verb in the past tense and you want to really stress that this other thing occurred before it, and very often that there's no other way to tell what order the words happened in. You don't necessarily have to use the past perfect in cases when time markers are clear. So in this particular case, we already made it clear that Louis Agassiz in 1833, his studies led him to the concept to propose an age in which great ice sheets existed. We don't actually need the past perfect tense here because we are already it's already clear that those take place in the same places in what are now currently temperate areas. So the past perfect is probably the only one. It's not needed here, but it's not grammatically incorrect. It's just not needed, and therefore it has extra words. Let's just see what we have. Choice A, though, the other thing that it has a problem with is that in which great ice sheets had existed in now currently. Now currently temperate. Now and currently mean the same thing, so this is definitely wordy, and we don't need to have both words. So are there any other answer choices that have now currently? Not B, not C, not D, not E. So that's only once is that redundancy apparent, and that's in choice A. Let's keep looking. Choice B, propose the concept of an age in which great ice sheets existed in what are now temperate areas. That's plausible. Choice C, concept of an age when great ice sheets existed where there were areas now temperate. Well, there's certainly extra words in that one because already in choice B we saw that these great ice sheets existed in what are now temperate areas. We don't have to say that the great ice sheets existed where there were areas that are now temperate. Why did I write words? Well, too many words in choice C. And we notice that there's also a split here between in which and when. Since we're talking about an age, which is both a time period and a span of time in which things can occur. So in this particular case, this is what you would call maybe a false split between in which and when. And as far as we're concerned, they're the same thing. So we don't actually have to worry about which one is more appropriate here. D, an age when great ice sheets had existed in current temperate areas. And again, by having the past perfect tense in a relative clause, we are really kind of expecting it to be opposed by some other simple past verb later for contrast. So because it's in its own separate relative clause. So again, we have that past perfect, which we don't need. Also, we have in choice D, when great ice sheets had existed in current temperate areas. Current temperate. Remember that adjectives like current or temperate can only modify nouns, or are only supposed to modify nouns unless you're making like a compound noun like machine gun. Machine gun is two words, and both of them, actually that's really more of a case of one noun modifying another noun, or nouns being joined together to create a different noun. In this case though, anyway, adjectives can only modify other adjectives. And if you want to modify an adjective, you need an adverb. And that's the difference between current and currently. Currently is the adverb. Current is the adjective. And if you want to say currently temperate, if you want to say that that they're temperate now, you need to use currently, not current. It's naughty. So choice D has that also as a problem. And choice E, when great ice sheets existed in areas now that are temperate. So adverbs are their own kind of modifier, and they too need to be as close as possible to the thing that they modify. If you're modifying temperate with currently, currently needs to be right next to it. The word now in choice E is the problem. Now is next to between areas and that. Areas now that are temperate. when in fact now is modifying the word are. We're trying to say that things are now temperate, that these areas are now temperate. Now needs to be next to are because that's the word it's modifying. So the placement of now makes choice E basically not English really. So choice B is our correct answer. It gives us the correct tense. It has the correct modification of the in what are now temperate areas, and yeah, doesn't introduce any other new errors. Page 670, question 71. Unlike the original National Museum of Science and Technology in Italy, where the models are encased in glass or operated only by staff members, the virtual Leonardo project, an online version of the museum, encourages visitors to touch each exhibit, which thereby activates the animated functions of the piece. The main thing that jumps out at me is this which. Normally, which goes to the word that's right before it. So comma which. You know, the dog, which I bought from a farmer 2 years ago, has been wonderful. Okay, which then refers to the noun closest to the comma. In this case, that's exhibit. And that's not actually what the exhibit is not what activates the animated functions of the piece. It's the touching, the act of touching, that whole thing that causes that whole act of messing around with it in the virtual online version. That's what activates the animation. So which, comma which, isn't going to be appropriate for usage in choice A. And choice E also has which. It's done a little bit differently. The which, it's actually which, comma, but that ends up working the same way. It again encourages visitors to touch each exhibit, which, as a result, activates the animated functions of the piece. Again, which is going to refer most directly back to exhibit, and that's not helping us out, so we can get rid of choice E. We need something that clearly indicates what it is that is activating the animated functions of the piece. So it's basically either the visitors or the touching. And touching is already, we're not likely to be able to use it because it's not in the underlined portion. If touch were in the underlined portion, maybe we would have something to go on. But we're probably better off using visitors as kind of the subject, encouraging the visitors to touch and activate. So we have visitors touch and visitors activate. That's going to be easier and parallel to boot, because remember the GMAT loves parallelism so much the two of them should get married. So choice B looks pretty wordy. Encourages visitors to touch each exhibit and in turn an activation. This one, by starting a phrase with an activation, that looks like apposition. And when you have apposition, you're renaming a noun with another noun or a noun phrase. The exhibit is not an activation. The touching is the activation, but again, touching isn't a noun in the sentence. It's part of a verb phrase about what visitors are doing. So B is way too wordy and also grammatically problematic. Now we really just have to choose between C and D, which do have activate. We have visitors touch and visitors activate. C has visitors touch each exhibit and it will activate the animated functions of the piece. It's not actually clear what it is referring to though, which makes it naughty, probably. Versus choice D encourages visitors to touch each exhibit and thereby activate. So there we have visitors touching and activating. It's parallel. It's actually also the most concise answer that introduces no new grammatical mistakes. So choice D is our winner for the Leonardo project, virtual Leonardo project. Okay, 671, number 72. More and more in recent years, cities are stressing the arts as a means to greater economic development and investing millions of dollars in cultural activities, despite strained municipal budgets and fading federal support. Okay. So we actually have a couple things that are parallel in this sentence. We have cities are stressing and investing. And that looks appropriately parallel. Well, and I guess the other parallelism there is despite strained municipal budgets and fading federal support, both noun phrases, but since they're not underlined, we can assume that they're correct. The other issue then here is the means to greater economic development. Okay, so you can have a means to something, and we can also have a means of something. I have to say the GMAT makes a distinction between the two that most of the usage sources that I've seen do not actually make that distinction. Their distinction is the means to is, when you say means to, it's your goal, versus means of, if it's a noun phrase, it means a specific way of doing something. And if you wanted to use means of, you would probably need to say means of getting or creating greater economic development. Anyway, so that's the distinction that they want to make. Choice A, though, of course, it is their goal to have greater economic development, so it's not incorrect to have that. Choice A remains an option because cities are stressing and investing. It remains parallel. Let's just see what the other ones have. Choice B, cities are stressing the arts as a means to greater development economically and investing. Okay, so it has and investing, which is parallel. That's good. It has this economically, though. And if you've been paying attention to the broadcasts and been tuning in, remember economically does not mean the same thing as economic. Aside from economically being an adverb and economic being an adjective, economically means efficiently and sometimes cheaply or cost effectively. So they're not actually going after greater development cheaply or efficiently. They're going after greater development of the economy. So economic means relating to the economy. Economically refers to a much more small-scale cost effectiveness. And that's a meaning of economically that we don't want in our answer choice. So choice B has economically. We can actually eliminate also choice D for the same reason. It's just plain the wrong word. Anyway, choice B was parallel. Choice C, means of greater economic development and invest. So choice B, or choice C, is not parallel because of the word invest. We need it to be investing. Cities are stressing and investing, not invest. So not C. And then choice E, a means for greater economic development and the investment of. The investment of. Also means for. I'm pretty sure that's never going to be correct. You would say means to or means of, not means for. Well, I guess there are some phrases you could come up with where you'd want to say, no, even then it's still not really going to be the best way to say it. So anyway, for those two reasons, choice E, not parallel, and means for, which brings us right back to the sentence as written. We have greater economic development rather than economically, and then we have investing to parallel stressing. So stressing and investing, and the correct adjective, economic. Choice A. So 671, number 73. Combining enormous physical strength with higher intelligence, the Neanderthals appear as equipped for facing any obstacle the environment could put in their path, but their relatively sudden disappearance during the Paleolithic era indicates that an inability to adapt to some environmental change led to their extinction. Okay, so we actually have this opening modifying phrase. We see this a lot in sentence correction, and then we have the noun, which is the Neanderthals. Now that's of course not in the underlined portion, but it just tells us that we can actually ignore this portion and really don't even need to start until the Neanderthals. So Neanderthals is our subject. And they appear as equipped. Now, this may or may not be news to you. It turns out that there aren't any Neanderthals anymore. They don't exist. So having a present tense appear does not work on its own. They can't appear as equipped. That's a present tense thing, and they are not present tense dudes. They are gone. And so we can get rid of other answer choices that also have appear as equipped, and that's basically choice appear equipped is the problem with A. Also choice C, doing that quick vertical scan, has appear equipped. So we need something to say in the sentence that these guys are in the past. They are historical people. So that they appear to have been equipped, or they appeared to be equipped, perhaps. So something past tense. Let's take a look at our answer choices then of what's left. We have B, D, and E. Choice B, the Neanderthals appear to have been equipped to face any obstacle the environment could put in their path. Okay, well, that's plausible. Let's see what we have for D. The Neanderthals appeared as equipped to face any obstacle the environment could put in their paths. So an issue here is as equipped. Remember that word as can be used, is typically used for comparisons, as equipped as this, or, you know, yeah, basically that's they appeared as equipped as somebody could be to face obstacles the environment put in their path. So as equipped, the word as really dooms choice D. On top of that, we go from paths, or go from path to paths. While the environment may well have thrown obstacles at them individually, like, you know, here's a tree for you, and here's a boulder coming at your head, other Neanderthal guy. Those type of obstacles, we're really speaking metaphorically. The environment does not actively throw obstacles in people's paths. And so really we're after kind of their path. We're kind of speaking of them as a species. So their metaphorical species-wide path. So paths is a little bit odd. In D, choice E appeared to have been equipped for facing any obstacle the environment. Oh wait, yeah, E. That's right. That's the right one. Appeared to have been equipped for facing any obstacle the environment could put in their path. So we have path instead of paths, which is good, but you aren't really equipped for facing. The normal way that you express purpose on the GMAT and in English in general is to use the infinitive. Which would be equipped to face rather than equipped for facing. Same number of words, but it's yet another kind of piece of the puzzle in terms of figuring out why people always say be suspicious of ing words in general on the GMAT. It's because this is one of the constructions where it turns up in wrong answer choices. You should not be suspicious entirely of ing words. That's actually a gross overstatement, because there's plenty of times maybe even more than half the time where ing words are correct as written on the GMAT. It's just there's some very specific instances where it shows up incorrectly. Here's one of them, using gerunds for purpose rather than infinitives. So you would expect to see on the GMAT. See, there was one right there. You would expect to see. Well, that's more of a verb complement. Anyway, equipped to face, not equipped for facing. Choice D is not it. Choice E isn't it. Choice D has this weird as in there that starts a comparison that it never finishes, as well as this plural paths, which isn't necessary. Choice B, appear to have been equipped to face any obstacle the environment could put in their path, is our correct answer. Page 671, number 74. A 1972 agreement between Canada and the United States reduced the amount of phosphates that municipalities had been allowed to dump into the Great Lakes. Okay. So, first thing that jumps out at me is the past perfect tense. Remember, again, it's only for things further in the past than some other past tense verb that, and again, in cases when there aren't any other time markers. So, had been allowed is our problem child here. Now, if we leave this as is in the past perfect tense, it reduced the amount of phosphates that municipalities had been allowed to dump into the Great Lakes. If it reduced the amount that they had been allowed, it's sort of a retroactive agreement. It reduced the amount that they used to be allowed. That's not true. It reduces the amount from that point, from the point that the agreement is signed or ratified or whatever, from that point forward. We don't want it to have a retroactive effect, unless that was in fact what the agreement said, that somehow companies that dumped phosphates into the Great Lakes would be penalized for amounts that they had previously dumped in excess of the new allowance. But then the passage and the sentence would have to make that much clearer. In this particular case, we just need it to have been from 1972 forward. It reduced the amount that they were allowed. And, in fact, if the agreement is still in effect, we need it to be that it reduced the amount that municipalities are allowed. So really, we have this past tense, reduce the amount they either were allowed if the agreement expired, or if it's still in effect. I mean, because there's nothing that says that this agreement isn't in effect anymore, it reduces the amount that they are still allowed to this day to dump into the Great Lakes. So we need the right verb tense. Yeah, I guess that's all I have for predictions. Choice A, of course, has that past perfect tense, which is not needed. Choice B, reduced the phosphate amount that municipalities had been dumping. Okay, so it's got this weird past perfect had been dumping. And I'm not actually sure how something could reduce, whoops, it's dumping. I'm not sure how it could reduce something that had already been done. So by using had been here, whoa, I have one too many bens in there. Sorry about that. That's what I get for talking while I write. Had been dumping. So you can't really reduce what somebody used to do in the past. That it's already been done. So reduce the amount that they had been dumping is a problem. Also, phosphate amount. Again, normally you don't modify nouns with other nouns. Phosphate is a noun. Amount is a noun. So phosphate amount is also a problem. The only time you're allowed to have one noun next to each other like that is when you're using it to make a new noun. Like, I don't know, baseball, or machine gun, or oven cleaner. Anyway, oven cleaner is neither oven nor cleaner. So anyway, phosphate amount, you would need to say amount of phosphate. Choice C also has phosphate amount, and it also has reduces. And while this agreement is still in effect, it actually started in 1972. It says so right in the passage. So reduced, we actually need reduced starting in 1972, and then depending on whether the agreement expired or whether it's still in effect, it needs to either be allowed, or either are allowed or were allowed. So we have reduces, we have phosphate amount, we have lots of problems with C. Phosphate amount, and then we also have been allowed to dump. I suppose it's technically true that if it had said it reduced the amount of phosphates municipalities have been allowed to dump. I guess I think that actually could be okay, but there's enough other things wrong with C, and it's still a wordier form, having that present perfect in there. Present perfect passive is a wordier form than just having a simple past tense or present tense verb. So D, reduce the amount of phosphates that municipalities are allowed to dump. That's one of our options here. So that's plausible. And then choice E, reduces. There's one problem. It's 1972 agreement. The amount of phosphates allowed for dumping. And we just had one of these where for plus the gerund as a verb object when instead it should be the infinitive. Or a verb complement, what you're allowed to do. So choice E, 2 errors. Choice D is our buddy. It correctly has the tense of the agreement, which is in the past. 1972 was a while ago. But it could still be in effect, and so it reduces what municipalities are allowed to do. So 671. We're not actually going to get off page 671. Question number 75. A proposal has been made to trim the horns from rhinoceroses to discourage poachers. The question is whether tourists will continue to visit game parks and see rhinoceroses after their horns are trimmed. Okay, so a couple issues jump out at me. We have the issue of will continue to visit game parks and see. We want to continue to visit and to see. Again, we want parallelism. We want them to continue to do both things. Or actually, really, to see is a purpose thing, to visit, to see the rhinoceroses. So that's one issue. We need to see. Another one is there. Even though knowledge of real life tells us that most tourists don't have horns, the there in the last line of the sentence as written could grammatically refer back to the tourists, and we don't actually want their horns trimmed. So we probably need to specify that it's the rhinoceroses who are having their horns trimmed. Those are the things that jump out at me. So choice A has problems. Namely, it says continue to visit and see, and it also has there. We can also ditch other answer choices that repeat the there error. Choice B has whether tourists will continue to visit game parks to see one once their horns are trimmed. And so that's got a there error as well as a couple other things. Like their horns, it should be their horns have been trimmed because the trimming needs to take place before the tourists visit. So there's a problem with that. And then coming to see one. Maybe they want to see more than one rhinoceros. Maybe they want to see several. So having one in there is kind of strange. Let's see. C doesn't have a there problem. Neither does D or E. Okay, so let's read C. The question is whether tourists will continue to visit game parks to see rhinoceroses once the animals' horns have been trimmed. Okay, well that addresses the concerns we had, but it looks wordier. It goes on to 3 lines, whereas all the other answer choices are only 2 lines. Maybe there's a more concise way of saying it. Choice D, the question is if tourists will continue to visit game parks and see rhinoceroses once the animals' horns are. So on this one, we have we'll visit and see when we want, sorry, I probably should just make this to visit and see when we really want it, want it to be to visit and to see. And then we also have the issue with the animal's horns are trimmed as opposed to have been trimmed. Again, the trimming needs to have taken place before the tourists visit, because they're not coming to witness the rhinoceros horn trimming. Choice E, the question is if tourists will continue to visit game parks to see one after the animal's horns have been. So again, there's this one issue. They probably want to see more than one rhinoceros. It's a strange introduction, so to have that in there. So choice C, whether tourists will continue to visit game parks to see rhinoceroses, more than one, as many as they can see, once the animal's horns have been trimmed. Okay, second to last one, page 671, number 76. Retailers reported moderate gains in their November sales, as much because of their sales of a year earlier being so bad as that shoppers were getting a head start on buying their holiday gifts. So our idiom that we are trying to track on this one is as much X as Y. And in this particular case, it's really as much because X as because Y. So tracking this idiom, of course, gets trickier when we have a lot of prepositional phrases in X and Y. So we just have to do the best we can. Choice A, then it does have a because on the first one, but it doesn't have a because on the second one, when we would really expect that for parallelism. So choice A doesn't have another because. That's a problem there. Also, it's got this so bad thing in it. Or so bad as. Well, actually, I guess that's actually correct. It's because of their, it's as much because of their sales a year ago being so bad. Really, it's actually more the being there, because their sales last year were last year, and it's unusual to say being for last year. Anyway, also it lacks the second because, so it's not parallel in any case. Choice B, as much because of their sales a year earlier having been as bad as, right, It's all the as's in this one that make it confusing. It's as much because X, right, so the first as in choice B is a problem. So the ultimate structure is, again, as much because X as because Y. And we have the because for the first one built in. It's in the not underlined portion. So as much because of their sales a year earlier having been as bad. The as bad in choice B sets up a comparison. As bad as what? But we don't actually get the second part of the comparison unless you want to count the second as in choice B as the other part of the comparison. That last year's sales were as bad as because shoppers were getting a head start on buying their holiday gifts, which doesn't even make sense. So we are either left with a comparison that's never finished or a comparison that's completely nonsensical. Either way, that's bad. Okay, choice C, as much because of their sales a year earlier being as bad, and again here we have another as bad. Comparison that's never completed. That's a problem. Choice D, as much because their sales a year earlier had been so bad, as because, okay, so this one's plausible because it doesn't introduce that second as, or first as, really, the first as is the problem. And also it, you know, we don't necessarily have to have the word of in there. It could be because of X or because Y. You know, but it's more parallel without the extra of, so D is pretty good. Choice E, as much because their sales of a year earlier were as bad as that shoppers. Okay, so this one has as bad in it again, a comparison that's either not completed or completed badly, depending on how you want to read the second as. Either way, we're either messing up with the idiom, or messing up the comparison. So choice D is the only one that has that particular thing. Well, I guess A doesn't have as bad, but it has other problems, and choice D is parallel to boot. So choice D is our correct answer. One more, number 77. Whoops. 671, number 77. The only way for growers to salvage frozen citrus is to process them quickly into juice concentrate before they rot when warmer weather returns. Immediately, we have frozen citrus. Citrus is not a noun that, despite ending in S, is secretly plural. It is singular. Kind of like, but it's a quantity. It's a material thing, like frozen water or something. You're not measuring individual citruses or individual waters. The only way for growers to salvage frozen citrus is to process it. So any pronoun that refers back to frozen citrus needs to be it, not them or they. Choice A has them. Choice B has they. Choice C has them. Choice D has they. I'm just doing vertical scans here. Choice E is the only one that has an it in it, and it's also one of the more wordy ones, but it's still correct. The only way for growers to salvage frozen citrus is to have it quickly processed into juice concentrate before warmer weather returns and rots the fruit. Again, every other answer choice has a they in it, referring to a thing that would expect a singular pronoun. So choice E is our correct answer. I'm actually done on time despite adding another question in. Sorry if you felt a little bit rushed, but I wanted to get back on schedule. And this is going to be a good place to stop. My name's Jim Jacobson. You've been watching Grockit.com's OGTV. This is the GMAT edition for your future MBA students out there going out to get your degrees. We're using the 12th edition to the Guide to the Test, which of course you had in front of you because I really can't imagine listening to these broadcasts without it, with the way I take notes. I mean that in a self-deprecating way, not that I think my notes are bad, but really they are incomplete, and this would be really less fruitful if you didn't have the book in front of you. Anyway, next time we will pick up on the next page. We're making really good progress here in sentence correction, and next time we'll pick up on page 672, number 78. Hope to see you there.